And good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. Welcome back to NowtV and Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute. You may not have heard that term before. Preterist is from a Latin term meaning past. So when we talk about preterist or preterism, we're talking about the view that all prophecy, and yes, I do mean all prophecy has been fulfilled. Now, if you're new to my channel, this may sound shocking to you. I'm glad to say, of course, that my channel continues to grow, not as fast as I would like. So be sure, do me a huge favor, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already, hit the like button, and hit the share button. Pardon me. It's really, really important, and it's very, very helpful. Now, what we're involved with on this channel is answering the challenge of Christ. The challenge of Christ is very clear, and it's very powerful, and it's very challenging. What bothers me so much, folks, it truly does, is how few Christians seem to be even aware of the challenge of Christ. The challenge is found in John chapter 10, verse 37, where Jesus said, a little bit of a paraphrase, but you get the idea. If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. What are you saying, Jesus? Jesus said that the Father gave him a mission. There are certain things he had to do. And if he did not do those things, we're not even supposed to believe in him. Now, this strikes at the very heart and the very core of the difference between Christianity and other world religions. Just recently, I was watching Dr. John Lennox. Fabulous guy, brilliant, brilliant man. And he said, the thing that sets Christianity apart from other world religions is that it is based on evidence. It is not, as one atheist has written, a religion that expects us and demands of us that we believe without any evidence whatsoever. That's a blatantly false claim. I mean, here's Jesus saying, if I don't do what the Father gave me to do not believe me. That is the challenge of Christ. And we're particularly focused on the challenge of Christ when it comes to the subject of eschatology. Eschatology is a great big fancy word from the Greek word eschatos, and eschatology, eschatos means last or last things. We normally associate the judgment, the coming of the Lord, and resurrection, the new creation, in the study of eschatology, because they are associated with the end of the age, the judgment, the resurrection, parousia. The word parousia is a Greek word meaning the presence of Christ. It's normally the word that is used to speak of his, quote, second coming, unquote. Now, I'm going back over this territory because as we get new subscribers, not everyone is associated or familiar with the terms that I sometimes use. And so I'm trying to give a little bit of a verbal glossary for you in case you're not familiar with the terms. By the way, if as you watch the video or videos, if I use words or terms or phrases that you do not understand, then just post a comment and say, hey, Don, look, you use this word. I don't know what it means. Can you define that for me? Because here's what's happened. What happens sometimes, you know, every single day I read scholarly literature. And a lot of the times, this scholarly literature uses what I call 50-cent words, big fancy words. Now, personally, I love that. Personally, I feel comfortable in that world. And I recognize, however, not everyone is familiar with that. So let me say again, if I use words or terms or phrases in any given video that you do not understand, you don't know the associations of it, you don't even know the background of it, you don't know why I use that word, then just post a comment and say, hey Don, boy, I would really wish you had defined the following word, term, or phrase, and tell me where in the world it came from. Okay? I never will forget, just a real quick illustration. A couple of years ago, I used the word procrustrian. And I had people contacting me going, what in the world do you mean procrustrian? Well, the word actually comes from the world of Greek mythology. And it was a god upon a bed and all stretched out. Now, this is a really, really, really super brief explanation, but the whole point of it is procrustrian came to mean a drawn out, not necessarily convoluted, but a long drawn out explanation of whatever subject might be. Instead of a real brief explanation, you get a procrustrian explanation, which means you get a really long drawn out, sometimes technical, sometimes wordy, but a long drawn out explanation. So I don't mean to confuse anybody when I use such words or terms. That's not my point. It's just that I'm so used to reading that kind of material that I naturally use that kind of vocabulary. Okay, to move on. Pardon me. So I've been sharing with you over the last several weeks some really, really, really key fundamental ideas that challenge the historical, that challenge the creedal view of eschatology. And here's what I mean by that. It is taken for granted in the evangelical Christian world, in all three views of eschatology, postmillennialism, amillennialism, which is the view that I was raised in as a young man, and premillennialism with all of its different nuances. It's believed in all three views that today, in 2025, we're looking for the coming of Jesus Christ out of heaven in what is commonly known as his second coming, to bring earth, the material cosmos, to an end, to bring human history to an end. And there are one of two positions that are taught in the world of evangelical Christianity. At this end of the age event, once again, Jesus comes out of heaven as a 5'5" Jewish man in a physical body, and he either destroys, absolutely, literally, physically, 100% destroys the physical creation. Now, that's the view that I was raised in, and I appealed to 2 Peter chapter 3 for proof of that. The earth and the elements that are therein shall be burned up. Oh, we know what the elements are. We know what the periodic table is and all of the elements that are listed there. And it says that the earth and the elements that are therein shall be burned up. Ah, that's the end of time. That's a misunderstanding of the text. I won't go into that this morning. You can go back and see some of my previous videos in which I discuss 2 Peter chapter 3 in good detail. The second view, which seems to be gathering a little bit more momentum over the last, well, 30, 40, even 50 years. When I was a young man, that view, the second view, was not nearly as popular as it is now. But that second view is that at the end of the current Christian age, at the end of time, at the end of human history, Jesus does come back out of heaven, literally, physically, bodily, as a 5'5" Jewish man, but he doesn't destroy the cosmos. Rather, he purges it, cleanses it, renovates it, recreates it into a nonetheless literal, physical new heaven and a new earth. Men such as N.T. Wright have been greatly responsible for bringing this viewpoint to the forefront. Men such as R.T. France, Scott McKnight, and other modern day scholars have also contributed to the growth of that view. So in both views, we are told that we are expecting the coming of Jesus out of heaven to put an end to human history. I have been sharing with you, contra that view, that is not what the Bible predicts. But that view has given strength to, has given incentive to the skeptics, the atheists, the agnostics, the Jews, the Muslims. How so? Very simply because here's the challenge of Christ. Jesus said, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels, and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now, unless you're willing to say or willing to believe that we have some 2,000-year-old people running around in our world today waiting to see the coming of Christ in his kingdom, this is a massive problem. And by the way, even if we had some 2,000-year-old people running around in the world today, they were not standing there when Jesus uttered those words. Or if they were standing there, then we need some proof of that. We need to be able to demonstrate, to prove. And by the way, I had encountered some Mormon folks several years ago who told me, yeah, some of those people are still alive today. And I said, oh, really? Where are they? Well, they're hidden out. They're ready to be revealed when the Lord comes. This is what you call an argumentum ad desperatum. When you're trying desperately to hold on to some kind of traditional view, then you come up with this literally unbelievable view that we have, that somewhere in the world today, there's some 2,000-year-old people alive. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that is truly ridiculous. It is totally false. Okay, so there's the challenge of Christ. Jesus said he was coming back in the first century generation, in judgment of all men, and in the kingdom. The atheists, the skeptics, last year, 2024, I had 2 formal internet debates with atheists, both of whom affirmed Jesus did not keep his word. Jesus lied, therefore he is not the Son of God. The Bible is not his inspired word. Now, this is not intended as a brag, but I will just simply say, both of those debates did not go well at all with the atheists. You see, ladies and gentlemen, and let me ask you this question. If you are confronted by an atheist, skeptic, agnostic, Jew, Muslim, Hindu, whatever, if you are confronted by one of those people who say, look around, the world is still here. Time still marches on. Nobody saw Jesus coming out of heaven on the clouds to destroy literal physical heaven and earth. Therefore, your faith as a Christian is in vain. Your Jesus failed. How will you answer that challenge of Christ? If you haven't yet met someone who challenges Christianity by challenging his predictions and saying his predictions failed, then you better hang on, because you're going to. Because this argument against Christianity is growing in popularity among all forms of skepticism. They know, ladies and gentlemen, they know very well that Jesus predicted his coming for the first century. And they know that when Christian apologists say, well, you just have to understand, God doesn't talk in time like we do. That's false. And they know it's false. They literally scoff at the idea. And what's sad is some former preterists are now claiming Jesus never made any such prediction whatsoever. It is a total misunderstanding of the time language of Scripture. So in other words, ladies and gentlemen, when the Bible affirmed 2,000 years ago that Jesus was going to come in a very, very little while and without delay, that language means nothing whatsoever. We are supposed to believe the judge is standing right at the door. Be patient, therefore, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. The coming of the Lord has drawn near. We're supposed to believe that Peter's affirmation that the appointed time for the judgment has arrived, and he said that 2,000 years ago, didn't mean a thing. Yeah, didn't mean a thing. Someone once said, I've been trying to find out who actually said it. Someone once said, it is amazing what people will believe when they do not want to believe the Bible. Well, folks, here on NowTV, I am offering you the answer to the challenge of Christ. So over the last several weeks, last several months, I've been demonstrating to you that Jesus never promised to come back as a 5'5" Jewish man in a physical body at the end of time, etc., etc. One of the things that I have been doing is I've been talking about the invisible parousia of Christ. And I've got to tell you, this is obviously part of the crux of the issue. Today, and what time I have left, okay, I just felt it necessary to go back and reestablish some truths. But what you have to understand is what Jesus said in Matthew 16, 27, 28. The Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father. That is Jesus saying he was going to come as the Father had come many times before. Let me say that again. Jesus was saying that he was going to come in the same way, in the same manner as his Father had come many times before. You may not be aware of the fact that the Father had come many times before, but he had. Just go to my website, get a copy of my book, Like Father, Like Son, on Clouds of Glory. I document it with passage after passage after passage after passage. Okay, so here is Jesus saying that his coming in judgment, in the kingdom, was going to be in the first century while some of those people were still alive. And he defines the nature of that coming as like the Father had come in the glory of the Father. That means, ladies and gentlemen, to give an ever so brief statement, the Father had never, ever, ever come literally, visibly, bodily out of heaven. He had come many times, but Yahweh in his sovereignty always used one nation to judge another nation. Just read Isaiah chapter 10. Chapter 5, 10 and following. I'll get it right in a moment. The Lord said the Assyrian was the rod in his hand. In Ezekiel chapter 30, 29 and 30, we're told that Yahweh put his sword in the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. He was going to use Babylon to judge Egypt. And he was going to use Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, was going to use the sword of Yahweh to destroy Judah and Jerusalem. And yet, Jeremiah 32, Zephaniah chapter 1, Jeremiah chapter 4, all of these passages talk about that destruction of Jerusalem and Judea at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar was going to be the day of the Lord. Yahweh would come out of heaven. He would destroy every living creature. Do you see what I'm trying to establish here, ladies and gentlemen? Now, in the remaining time this morning, I want to touch on something that I develop extensively in my new book, All Things, These Are the Days in Which All Things Must Be Fulfilled. I want to share with you one aspect of this book that is, without any shadow of a doubt, one of the most overlooked, one of the most unknown, or maybe even ignored elements of eschatology. The dispensationalists, they kind of nibble around the edges of it. They never develop it in the way the Bible does. So what are you talking about, Preston? It is this. I want you to pay really, really close attention to me here. I want you to catch the power of what I'm going to share with you today, introduction, and what I'm going to share with you over the next several weeks. Okay? Every single constituent element of eschatology, the day of the Lord, the judgment, the resurrection, the new creation, every single element of eschatology is, in both the Old Testament and the New, set within the context of the time of the judgment and the destruction of Old Covenant Israel and the destruction of the Old Covenant temple. Not the destruction of a tribulation temple at some point in our future. No. Every tenet, every element of eschatology is posited at the time of the judgment and the destruction of Old Covenant Israel and the destruction of the Old Covenant temple that was standing in the first century when Jesus told his apostles, as they have shown him the beautiful, magnificent stones of the temple that was standing then. And Jesus said, "Do you not see all of these things? The time is coming in which not one stone will be left standing on top of another." They immediately associate that event with the end of the age and Christ's parousia. Now look, I was raised believing and teaching Well, the apostles were just simply confused. Look at all of the other times in which Jesus would say something, and we are told the disciples did not know. I mean, after all, Jesus' own brothers didn't believe that he was the Son of God, until he was raised from the dead. John chapter 5, 1-5. There's no question whatsoever that the apostles were confused about much of Jesus' teaching. But most of all, they were confused about his predictions of his death, burial, and resurrection. Matthew chapter 16, 17, 20, 21. They didn't get it. But listen to me very carefully. There is not one single verse in all of the New Testament, out of all of the passages that speak of the apostles not knowing, not understanding what Jesus was saying to them, there is not one single example in which, number one, he was discussing the end of the age, the judgment, the resurrection, and his parousia. Not one of those passages ever mentions, says, hints, or suggests that the apostles did not understand what he was saying. And so they asked for clarification. Lord, what do you mean by the day of the Lord? What do you mean by resurrection? Not one time. Matter of fact, in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus told a parable about the end of the age and his coming. He told 3 other parables about the end of the age. Here's what's significant about that. Those parables terminated or were to be fulfilled at the time when the power of the holy people be completely shattered. Because Matthew 13:43 quotes from Daniel chapter 12, which predicted that time of fulfillment. But Jesus asked the apostles, do you understand? And they said, yes. It's wrong to say the apostles were confused, and I'm out of time.